everyone. This is now with the time change, it feels like it is the afternoon. I'm Charlie Zelli, Chair of the Metropolitan Council. This is the Committee of the Whole, March 15th, 2023. And just so for actually new council members as well as those seasoned council members like myself, that a committee of the whole is normally in another room where we have an opportunity to have a more informal setting, to have regular conversation, and to go deeper into issues. It's really not a meeting where we have business items to act on it. But having said that, we do have a business item tonight, so we have that. And we have in the past few weeks a number of times where we've, because of some urgency, on kind of an emergency basis, we often take action at a committee of the whole. We're allowed to do that, but we prefer not to. So this is, so I'm sorry that you're not getting the full feel of just sitting around a table for more kind of less formal, more inquisitive, more deeper dives into issues, which we will be doing today after that business item. So anyway, welcome. And there is an agenda which lays out the information items we're going to be looking at today, particularly getting into the nitty-gritty of our regional development guide, which is the year that we're really going to be spending time doing that. So, so if there is no objection, I'm going to assume we're going to determine the agenda to be approved. However, we do need to take a vote on approving the minutes that were sent out earlier for the meeting on March 1st, 2023, the Committee of the Whole. And I know many of you were not there, but I know there's a few of you who were. So I would entertain a motion and a second to approve the minutes.
So moved. Oh, second.
You get a pick.
We're going to decide who. Thank you, both. Any discussion? Corrections? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. We're on to business item 2023-66, which is a business item, and is that Councilmember Barber?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, council members, business item number 2023-66, same week, is regarding Metro Transit Supplemental Security Services. As part of Metro Transit's work to advance the Safety and Security Action Plan, Metro Transit started a pilot program for unarmed uniformed security services at the Franklin Avenue Light Rail Station in September of 2022. The program was expanded to Lake Street Midtown Light Rail Station in November of 2022. The program saw an overall decrease in police calls for service at the Franklin Avenue Station, also had positive customer and employee feedback, as well as a reduction in service-related issues to those facilities. Based on that data, Metro Transit developed a plan to further expand the program to 4 additional locations: Brooklyn Center Transit Station, Uptown Transit Station, Chicago Lake Street Transit Station, and the Central Station in St. Paul. A request for proposal was issued in November of 2022. On January 4th, 2023, the council received 6 proposals to be evaluated for consideration of award. The 6-member evaluation panel reached a consensus that the proposal submitted by Allied Universal is the most advantageous to the council. The proposed contract is for an amount not to exceed $6 million. The term of this contract is 1 year at $3 million, with the option to renew for 1 year at $3 million if the council is satisfied with the services being provided by the vendor. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute contract 2022P123 with Allied Universal for security officer services at council-owned and leased facilities in an amount not to exceed $6 million.
Thank you. Is there a second for that motion? Thank you, Councilmember Chambliss. And Any questions, comments? Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have several questions, but they're just things that came up as I was reading the report and trying to dig in, just find out a little more of the specifics. So I sent them in earlier, and I know we've got answers, so we can run through these pretty quickly. But I wanted to know how many security officers will work approximately at each of the 6 locations. What shifts or hours of the day will they be assigned to provide security at each location, and how many hours of service are we getting for the $3 million, and then again, the $3 million, $6 million total over 2 years. I just would like to know the general breakdown of the $6 million contract fee, which I'm happy to look afterwards, once it's approved. I just want to see it. Also, does Allied provide liability insurance for any incidents or claims that might arise out of their service? Are they covered under our umbrella policy? It's a 2-year contract, and I guess, is it our plan at the end of the contract that will be up to our full complement of authorized police officers to cover policing duties in these locations and all other duties? I think that's all of our hope, but I just, 2 years can go by pretty quickly, and we're working as fast as we can to get our own staffing up. And I know that that's been a question in the public too. I've seen, why are they hiring private security when we should be hiring more officers? But we're having trouble doing that like everybody else right now. I also saw via Metro Transit tweet that 4 of the locations are going to be shut down until security can be placed in sight, so I'm just curious when they'll reopen. Also, I'm just, I went on a transit PD ride-along last fall. That was an eye-opener for anyone that hasn't gone on ride-alongs. I strongly suggest it, and I was encouraged by other council members to do so. I'm just wondering, too, about thorough cleanings, repairs, removal of drug paraphernalia, and all of that in the stations too. I know it's probably an uphill battle to keep it to a standard that we would want, but I think with security, hopefully that's part of it too, where I think the feel and presence of it is going to be improved physically. Was there, I'm curious about who is part of the review and selection committee, but I can happily hear about that afterwards. And then, let's see. Oh, I was just curious too, when would something like this have gone through management and then the management committee? And then will we also, I think this is awesome, I'm very supportive of it, but I'm just curious too, will we be getting regular updates on the crime stats? Because I think we're gonna see movement, and we have through our trial run of this, but I just would, like to know that for sure as part of this, we of course should just see how's it going, right? And then we'll have the council itself, ourselves here, will have information as we move along to adjust if we need to along the way. So it's a lot of questions, but hopefully some of them can just be quickly responded to.
Yeah, and I think, Lieutenant Lindner, are you here? Maybe you could, I'm sorry.
I can take a shot, and then I will call up Lieutenant if needed. It's kind of how, if there were more details.
Councilmember Barber.
And we also have Jody Jacoby here if we need. So a couple of things. One of the questions was how many security officers will work at each of the 6 locations. Right now, we're looking at 2 officers per shift. There's some early morning hours and things like that where there might be just 1. We do have the breakdown for all the different stations, kind of the times of day and things like that, and we can certainly provide that out. The hourly rates, the bid was based on the hourly rates and how many hours we thought we would need service at these different stations. And so again, that can be put out. For liability insurance, the vendor would agree to provide the standard insurance and indemnification clauses within our council service contracts. And a sample of this was provided with the RFP, so they're aware of the requirements. Right now, as I said, it is a 2-year contract, so we'll continually review to make sure it makes sense. It's one part of the safety and security plan, which has many multifaceted approaches, and this is just one piece of all of that. And then you mentioned the Metro Transit suite, that 4 of these locations will be shut down. That is not correct. 1 is being shut down right now. Uptown Transit Station is closed. There have been put shelters in front, so there is protective shelters in front of that space, but the other facilities remain open. Let's see, and of course we do constantly are doing cleaning and updating and all of that, and definitely hope that the presence of additional personnel at the stations will help. The selection committee, we can send that information out, but it was a group of combination between Metro Transit Police Department and Metro Transit staff. And then the vote was, I know your last question was what the vote was, and it was unanimous at Transportation Committee on Monday.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Councilmember Barber. I really appreciate that. I looked in the report, and sometimes it's just nice to have some of those details, especially since it's such a high priority and great work that's gone into it, and hopefully, as it's communicated out in the public, they'll know some of the details too. So I appreciate you taking time to answer that.
And if I may, I believe some of the detail in the committee report was because our council agenda had to be posted Friday, and our vote on council or committee was on Monday.
Right. Councilmember Chambliss.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And also in response to Councilmember Johnson's questions, I had very similar questions at the Transportation Committee meeting, and was glad that Chair Barber was able to provide some of the answers because they did come up in our committee meeting. I have been contacted by individuals at some of these transit centers that are wanting to know what our plan is. So the report and the changes and this business item is very timely for what the community and the community resources and businesses are looking for at and near the transit centers.
And I just would add, Councilmember Chambliss, because I know you've been talking to folks at Brooklyn Center, and tomorrow I have a meeting in St. Paul. Many of the same questions of how, with additional outside security, which is unarmed, how it dovetails and layer, I guess the layered approach with local police jurisdictions and our own police. So this is all a puzzle. It is not a cookie cutter. It's different for each location, but it's important that we have this resource to kind of be part of a larger solution.
Yep.
Any other questions on this issue? Wendy?
I don't have a
Councilmember
question so much as a comment, but thank you, Mr. Chair. It's unfortunate that we need to do this, but we really need to do this. We've seen just a decline in the behavior at stations. We've seen damage to our equipment. And so having somebody there just to preserve our station is absolutely necessary at this point. It would be nice to think that it won't be necessary in 2 years, but that's kind of based on larger societal issues that we don't necessarily have any control over. But we need to have a safe place for our transit riders to catch their rides and not have to deal with some of the behaviors that we've been having. I hope that it's not just whack-a-mole and the people, you know, at first they're probably just going to go somewhere else, but we need to look at those bigger societal solutions to deal with the behaviors. But until that happens, this is what we really need to do to preserve our equipment and structures and a sense of safety for our riders.
Well, I would echo what Councilmember Wolf says in that human presence we have found, particularly in platforms and stations, is really important in order for the safety of our employees and our customers to create that welcoming environment. Any other? Oh, Councilmember Pacheco.
Mr. Chair, and I think I brought it up one other time, and that is that when I was over at one of the Green Line extension, Blue Line extension meetings, we had a few neighbors come and ask questions about the safety and the like from the site, but we had people coming over from the Hiawatha line there, the Blue Line over there, and talking about living so close to it. And my suggestion then was, still is that we ought to have like a 5 mile, or 2 mile, 1 mile, or whatever it is radius around each of these stops with a communication plan and what they have to put up with. You know, it's not necessarily just the hottest spot as a transit center, but in between there, we have spots that people park their car, leave it there all night, or they literally go get on a plane or something and they leave all their stuff there and they come back. there's a lot of these little issues that are quality of life issues that also need to be addressed, and along with the communication, what's going there. And I would suggest again that we really have just a little plan for each. I don't know how many stops we have, but I've been up and down the Hiawatha one quite a bit. I have family close by, and they live with this. So I think that's something we should have something we could pursue, is just having a literal plan around these stops.
And thank you, Councilmember. I would also suggest, having just spent some time on the Blue Line yesterday on the Lake Street area, there's a real need for coordination of the various jurisdictions. Because right around Lake Street, it is not just Metro Transit, but it's the city of Minneapolis. There's MnDOT, so we have State Highway Patrol. There's Hennepin Facility right across the street. We have Hennepin County Sheriff. We have private security of the buildings. So all this are very more of a complicated puzzle. So convening and coordinating these activities, the positive kind of activity is really important for us to be encouraging. You know, I might call, and I'm sorry to do this, Jody Jacoby just mentioned, Jody, there's been some questions in our minds about the due diligence of this contractor, and you found out some information which I just learned a few minutes ago, and I think it would be helpful, I think, if you shared that with the full council.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, committee members, my name is Jody Jacoby, and I'm the director of the procurement department. In my staff that facilitate procurements like this is a request for proposal. When the proposals come in, they perform what we call a responsiveness check. Did they submit the paperwork? Did they submit all the documents? And then also a responsibility determination. Does their proposal represent at least the minimum service that we expect with the work? And then they also ask for references. And Allied provided 5 references, and we made personal phone call with 2 of those references. And both of the reference checks from the security officers had very positive things about the service to their agency. In fact, one was a light rail provider, and they had worked with them for 7 years. The other agency is here in the metro area, Metro State. And Allied came in at a time that they had really dire emergent needs with a contractor that wasn't performing. And they came in and teamed with their existing staff and were able to provide the quality of service and the level of service. And in fact, they had contract terms renewed. So some of the due diligence of the proposals that you see before you do have this screening that's embedded in the process, in both the responsiveness, providing the insurance that you asked, the minimum insurance, and that's set uniquely for every contract depending on the unique needs. So for this specific contract, our team met with risk management and the Office of General Counsel and had specific insurance requirement. Again, and if a proposer didn't provide that, they wouldn't be considered for further consideration. And so the information on the responsiveness and responsibility is taken very seriously in procurement and at the council, in addition to quality, scope of work, fair price, and all those other pillars that we hold so dear in the public sector.
Thank you. Any other questions, thoughts? Councilmember Barber.
I just want to reiterate and thank you for providing the information on the company. And I think that, you know, this is really just one of those pieces of our safety and security action plan. It's an additional presence. It's an unarmed presence, but it is more people at our platforms. Really help provide a deterrence to some of the activities we're seeing. And I think it's really important to know also that one of the key things that these personnel will be able to contact our transit police when they need to be contacted, when we need to have people out in the system, and also be trained with in alignment with what our practices and procedures are.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Cameron.
Councilmember Barber just addressed one of my questions, which is how we ensure that they're a contracted services in line with the code of conducts set by our Metro Transit Police Department, since we are contracting out services for security. I had one question about timeline for implementation of these services, and then I just want to echo some of the items that Councilmember Johnson brought up, and I do want to emphasize how important it is that we have an accountability mechanism in place to ensure that this contractor meets the standards that we would hold our Metro Transit Police Department to, even though they are an outside service, regardless of whether, not just through the liability insurance, but also that we are holding them to a higher standard, because ultimately we will be responsible for whatever actions their employees take. And so I want to really echo that as a primary concern as we move forward with the contract.
Thank you, absolutely. Councilmember Johnson.
Just one other quick question. What uniform will they be wearing? Will people know that they're part of Metro Transit? So if they need assistance or help they know that they're part of the team that's there to help keep them safe and secure.
If we could, Lieutenant Lindner, if you want to comment both on the timeline and.
Lieutenant Lindner, we knew we'd get you here eventually.
Glad to come back and mix up your meeting a little bit again. Mr. Chair and council members, timeline, and Jody can probably speak to this a little better, but off the top of my head, timeline is if we get approval, the attorneys, procurement, and the vendor would have to work things out. That could be 2 to 3 weeks of kind of back and forth. There's also, prior to that, I guess there's a 5-day period for other vendors to I guess question maybe why they did or did not get selected. So within that time, so we're talking 2 to 3 weeks out, maybe a month. And to the best of my knowledge, with Allied, they would come in and probably try to hit the ground within about a 30-day notice. So once they have, I think, all the paperwork in place and notice to proceed, if you will, they could potentially hit the ground within maybe a month. And we'll see, though. There's unknowns with that. I mean, staffing issues that they could certainly run into. Maybe we can't launch all 6 sites at one time. Maybe we have to stagger that in. There's a lot of variables still in that, but and variables and unknowns, but we'll have to just kind of cross that bridge when we get there. As far as a uniform goes, we haven't picked that out exactly yet. The current vendor, Belcom, is just in a standard security outfit. Allied, in my mind, in my vision, unless somebody here has to, or wants to weigh in on it, would be similarly uniformed. They're not wearing transit, they're not identifying as transit. They're identifying as Allied Security, Allied Universal Security, and so. However, we put them in, most likely in a uniform setting, so that they look professional and neat and orderly, and hopefully that presence will hold some weight at our locations.
Councilor Johnson.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I have some past experience with something similar to this, and I just know that the people that I was serving in the area that I was working, it was just, we found out quickly that people needed to know, are they one of ours, or are they from, no, I figured regular riders will figure it out, but, just so that there's no confusion, that they're identified in some way, and they're not police officers, but they're identified in some way that they're on our team, I think. And then again, I would just reiterate, I'm asking that, certainly Transportation Committee does a great job, but just to bring regular updates on how it's progressing. Are they able to, it's a hard labor market, so how's it going? But then also the stats on the crime, reporting of crime and how it's working. And I would also really support what Councilmember Pacheco said for putting a plan together around these stations, a communications plan, so people in the area are in the know about what's going on, and we're in the know about the challenges that they're facing. So I hope that these get absorbed. I think sometimes a lot of good ideas come out, and we cross our fingers, and I know you guys hear them, and you're all busy, but some of these are really worthy, and I know they've been asked before.
Thank you. Councilmember Lilligren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to my colleagues for this debate. This is really helpful. And I just want to lift up that idea of the communications plan or even a plan in place for a station area. And of course, our riders come through an area to get to the station, and so that matters. And I work very, very near the Franklin Avenue LRT station, just a couple blocks away. And when we introduced the pilot program, there you could tell in the community, because suddenly some of the unwelcome activities that were happening at the station started happening at my building. And so I think it's very useful for the surrounding areas to know. And the station on Franklin is very near Little Earth, about 4 blocks away. And so a lot of families and children walk to the station. And it's the activities that are in the state around the station that have as much impact on the full rider experience.
Lieutenant Lindner, is the, we talked about uniforms. They're not armed, these
Correct.
officers, but are they carrying radios? What else are they carrying?
Mr. Chair and council members, the current company is just carrying a cell phone, and then if they have a need to ask us to respond, there's something that they can't deal with, they call. They have a direct line to dispatch, our dispatch.
Okay.
And then our officers, our staff are dispatched from there. We haven't worked out the details with Allied Universal, but I would this is working right now with the current vendor. And unless Allied, some companies have their own dispatch center, which could talk dispatch to dispatch. But in lieu of that, just a cell phone call to a direct line to our dispatch is a direct pipeline, and we get officers or medical, whatever the incident is, we get that rolling right away.
Got it. Great.
All right.
Councilmember Johnson.
One last question. So while they're out there and things might be taking place and they have a cell phone, are they allowed to take photos or get pictures to get to PD if PD is on its way so that they can help in an incident one way or the other identify who's in trouble or who's making trouble?
Mr. Chair and council members, they're certainly allowed to do that. In fact, and I don't recall if it was Allied and poring over all the paperwork and all the proposals, but one of the companies, and it may have been Allied, asked about if there's a problem with them wearing body cameras. And my answer would be absolutely not. That'd be perfect, and we'd love that if they do that. So not an issue, obviously, for photographs. Again, back in the uniform thing, the current vendor, I put them into reflective safety vests, so they don't just look like somebody standing around waiting for the next train. That seems to have helped. At least they're easily identifiable with large letters security on the back of it. That seems to have helped. Instead of kind of starting off with just a regular uniform, they blend in, just look like somebody standing there waiting for the next train to come.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, that begs the question then on the body cams. I think that's super important, but then to Councilmember Cameron's point, they have to sync up with data privacy and all of our rules and regs around that. And I think it would be very useful for their own protection, for the protection of others, depending on what's going on. But that's going to be, something that I hope we've really vetted very carefully, because can it be used for evidence? Can it be used for all the things? And it has to, maybe you've done all that with legal, but I think that's an important thing. But if they've got that capability, I think it would be important to implement that.
Okay. Any more discussion, questions? No. Tony.
Just real quick, I am not as familiar as I would like to be with the opportunity for Metro Transit Police to link up to services. But in the case that there is an incident requiring not necessarily a safety or a police response or a medical response, but a services response, will these unarmed security officers also have the opportunity to link, or will they link through Metro Transit Police? How will that work?
Mr. Chair and council members, to the best of my knowledge, what would make sense to me is that they link through us. If whatever the issue is, if it's something they can't handle or they can't answer, or don't have a clear path forward, that they would just get us involved. That'd be the easiest course of action.
And in the future, I'd just ask for more information about how that works. Is it always an officer responding, or is there an opportunity for a social services response first? I can put that on hold for a later update.
For sure.
Thank you.
Great questions. All right, we have a motion and a second. Ready for a vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, that motion carried. Thanks, everyone, for this
Thank you.
Thank you.
thorough conversation, and good luck. And we'll look forward to those reports. One thing to consider, because it's been asked, is we do have quarterly updates of our safety action plan, and this certainly, some of the stats and our track record, and this is one of the pillars of our safety action plan. So we'll be hearing more updates on it online. Thank you. So now we have our two information items, and I see we have, I see Michael here as well as Raya. So I know Raya maybe is first. Hi. And we're going to hear about the community designations element of the regional plan development. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Hello, Chair, Council members. My name is Raya Esmaeili. I'm a planning analyst with the Local Planning Assistance Unit and the Community Development Division, and here to present to you about community designations, which may be familiar to some of the council members who have heard it in either previous CDC and LUAC meetings, and otherwise providing some information to newer council members about some efforts that we've been working on as part of the 2050 Regional Development Guide. So you may or may not be familiar with the community designations, but they are an important part of our efforts in the regional planning process because they further regional policy outcomes and help us plan and implement them at the local level. The community designations are the basis for our policies at the local level and provide specific density expectations, and that is based on them recognizing differences and similarities between communities in the region. We use community designations to guide growth in the region to make sure that we are working with the charge of the Metropolitan Council for orderly growth, but also that helps us protect agricultural land and natural amenities in the region. I'm just going to walk through a little bit of history here. Community designations have always been a part of the Regional Development Guide since the beginning. In the past, they've been called geographic planning areas. Since Thrive, we've been calling them community designations. So the very first Regional Development Guide, that was the Metropolitan Development Framework Guide, adopted in 1975. And it divided the region into basically just two major service areas, the urban service area and the rural service area. And these community designations were at that point called generalized policy areas. So those are identified on this map. Then in 1986, we had the Metropolitan Development and Investment Framework, which kind of reaffirmed that urban-rural concept that was detailed in the previous plan, but also extended the Metropolitan Urban Service Area to the year 2000. It did retain that policy of when we had metropolitan centers and freestanding growth centers. We don't have that. We currently have rural centers, which you will see later. And then we did have regional business concentrations in the urban area in this plan. Moving forward, in 1996, then the regional blueprint was adopted. It continued the concept of MUSA and further defined the boundary as the maximum long-term service area for regional services to year 2040. The land outside of 2040 was planned to remain permanently rural or agricultural, which kind of shows on this map with the light blue. And at this point, then we stopped using that metropolitan centers and regional business concentrations on the map. Then in 2004, the Regional Development Framework was adopted, which defined the geographic planning areas as either developed or developing in the context of urban planning areas, and then there were a variety of rural planning areas. So this basically is what was used in the review of the 2030 plans as we are getting closer to the time frame. And it continued to apply distinctions between the urban and rural areas and identify those specific rural areas. The one thing is that we didn't have, in this map, in this framework, we didn't have the same kind of protection in the previous versions of the plan to the centers and regional business concentrations, as I mentioned, and some agricultural areas because of the shifts in the policy. Then Thrive MSP 2040, which is currently the adopted regional development guide that was adopted in 2014. And this map that you're seeing is the current community designations map. This is as of August of 2021, I believe. So it reflects some changes through comprehensive plan updates and amendments that may have changed some of those community designations since 2014. It divides the region into two main areas of urban service area and rural service area. And each of them you'll see on the map in the legend. Urban service area currently has 5 designations under it, and rural service area has 4. So the approach in Thrive, the approach within urban service area became a little more refined. So we have more categories compared to the 2030 plan, which was just developed and developing. So we were trying to acknowledge the uniqueness of different communities and be able to better appropriate our policies to these areas. So the community designations, I want to mention that in Thrive, there were 5 factors that helped define the community designations, and those variables, I'm going to call them, were the metropolitan urban service area, which kind of separated the 4 from the 4 of the rural from the 5 of the urban, the percentage of developable land committed to urban uses, the age of housing stock, which was used as a proxy for age of infrastructure, and intersection density, which basically indicates connectivity, urban form, and accessibility, and the long-term wastewater service area, which kind of defined where some of those rural service area designations will go. So the current project, as again part of the 2050 Regional Development Guide, we are or have attempted to update the community designations to use them as a basis for some of the policy conversations and discussions moving forward up until the adoption of the next Regional Development Guide. So as we are talking about specific policies, land use policies, transportation policies, and so on, we are able to better tailor them to community designations. The one thing to mention is that this project started the beginning of last year, so it was end of 2021, beginning of 2022. It has been an iterative analysis. There was a lot of consulting with the Land Use Advisory Committee and getting their feedback. We had an internal and external focus group, which I will talk about a little later. So we had that engagement component as a part of it. We looked at the 5 variables that I mentioned with Thrive, as well as a slate of additional variables that were either part of discussion then or were brought up now. So we did analysis on these variables, how they work together, how they help us group these communities together to determine what the variables should be. Maybe they should be the same, maybe they should change. And then brought that back to our stakeholders, and this process kind of continued several times throughout all of last year, which helped us determine the final variables and develop proposals. The variables that are used at the moment, and I will get to the map a little later, are the metropolitan urban service area still, because it separates the urban service area from rural. And one thing that our stakeholders were very clear and helped us define is that the analysis in this project focused mainly on the urban service area. So anything outside of the MUSA remained the same. We did not touch the rural designations. And one other thing that I should say is that at this point, this project was only about the designations themselves, and no policy associated with them have been discussed yet. That is part of the conversations happening this year, continuing into next year. And then so then there was the Metropolitan Urban Service Area. Age of housing stock continued, same as intersection density, but one variable is new, and that is planned residential density. And that came from the 2040 comprehensive plans from the local community. So we try to capture what the cities were planning for their own vision of what they want to see locally happen, and then reflect that in the plan. So these are the 4 variables that were used to create a developing or a proposal. There were several proposals that were developed, and eventually, after lots of feedback, as well as one external feedback that we had when we released this for basically public comment from all of the cities, not just our focus groups, that came to what we currently have as a working draft. I say that it's a working draft because there is no final adoption on these community designations until it's adopted as part of the 2050 Regional Development Guide altogether as a whole. So this is a map that shows our external focus group. So it just shows the cities, and then a couple counties were involved. We had a consultant that actually represents the Dakota County Collaborative that was involved. So these external stakeholders helped us shape what you'll see as the working draft of community designations. We also had an internal focus group, and that included staff from all the areas within the council. We had land use, transportation, parks, wastewater, surface water, water supply. I think I'm going to stop reading off of this page. It just keeps going. But we had a good group that had a pretty good discussion, and we met monthly all of last year until we got to the proposals. This just shows the project timeline that I pretty much explained in the previous slides. And one thing that I would say is that this presentation was brought forward to the CDC in February, actually brought forward to Land Use Advisory Committee for their final recommendation of the draft documents, draft designations to CDC in late January, then came to CDC in February, and now it's coming to you, but as an information item, so there's no action needed for you to take. This is these are the proposed designations. A little simplified because within the urban service area, we only have 4 designations now. We slightly shifted the names of the designations, but trying not to deviate too much to avoid any kind of potential confusion and or any potential misunderstanding about what those designations represent. So those 4 are urban, urban edge, suburban, and suburban edge. And on the left side of the screen, you see the variables that are used for this round of community designations.
Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Mrs. Esmaeili, and sorry to interrupt your flow here, but I can't believe I never asked this question before, but when we look at the rural centers, what determines those boundaries? Are those city limits or, yeah, okay.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Lilligren, those boundaries are mostly, and you see that most of those extending outside of the rural center because they mostly represent the ultimate boundary of those cities, which includes orderly annexation areas.
Oh, thank you.
So all of those small cities have some kind of an orderly annexation agreement with their adjacent townships.
Thank you.
It may or may not happen, but those are the existing situations. I should say also that, as I mentioned, we didn't quite touch that in this round because they were part of the rural service area. So they represent the exact same boundary as Thrive does. The next steps for this process are that now we're going to move towards the density analysis and try to start from comparing the 2030 versus the 2040 comprehensive plans and seeing what's happening at the local level and what the outcomes of our requirements were between the two rounds of planning. And then in order to be able to determine minimum density requirements based on community designations, and also we will continue the conversations on determination of minimum density requirements around transit station areas, because those are different than just the community designation, slightly higher. And we will continue to tie the density analysis with land use policy conversations. That is all I have for you. I apologize if it sounded like I was running through it. I want to make sure that you have enough time for the next agenda item as well.
Well, and for questions?
Yes, absolutely.
comments?
I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick comment. I'm really happy that there's not big changes to the rural service area. I think that's very beneficial to those communities. They put a lot of work into some of their planning, especially comprehensive planning. I think will ease some of the transition to the next round. My question is, in a couple of the smaller communities, like Osseo, and a couple of the ones around, like Osseo, I looked it up, as a population of 2,600, but it's the proposed designation is the same as Minneapolis. And so are we, as part of this analysis, are you going out to these communities and talking with them? And how are we getting information back? Because that could have big implications for that community. So I'd just be curious of what those steps are.
Yes. Mr. Chair, Councilmember Barber, I'm glad that you noted that. So we did release this map basically as part of as us seeking feedback from all of the cities and townships in the region, so not just the ones that were part of the focus groups. And we didn't, like some of these anomalies or look like anomalies, we didn't necessarily hear anything from the communities themselves, but some of the ones like Osseo that stood out in a way that seemed very odd. We did double check with the data because this was a kind of a statistical exercise, and we wanted to make sure that it represents what's on the ground, which seemed to still jive. At the same time, I would say that that's part of the reason that this is a working draft and not a final draft, because we realized that the something like minimum density requirements haven't been defined yet. So based on some of those conversations as part of the land use policies, some of these designations may need to change, because for a city like Osseo, it may be impossible to have to plan at densities that are not really able to reach at that geography with the land supply, because the forecast model is also happening at the same time. So we don't have all of that information yet in order to be able to provide the final of what this looks like. So we're hoping that in the next year we're able to refine this map as we have more information, and also through the comprehensive planning process, even if this ends up remaining the same. Throughout the comprehensive planning process, all of these cities and communities have a chance to work with us for a change in community designations if so is necessary, and we did that in the last round as well. In the comprehensive plan, several communities' designations changed.
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a very quick follow-up. Thank you. I'm glad to hear it's still working. I would, like some of these communities that did change, it might be worth actually reaching out directly to, because like using Osseo again, it went from suburban, not even all the way up to urban, and so it seems like a big jump. And even though the data lines up there, I'd be curious, you probably want to get some feedback from those communities because it does have implications for their planning. But thank you for the good background.
Thank you.
Councilmember Chambliss.
I may have missed this, Chair, and Mrs. Esmaeili, but what was the fifth category that was removed for the proposed designation?
Councilmember, do you mean from the urban service area?
Yes.
The fifth category that's not in there was the long-term service area. That was part of Thrive MSP 2040. That's what you meant?
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Questions? Councilmember Wolf?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just comment to the light blue area kind of ended up being a mash together of the old suburban edge and emerging suburban edge. And then we had an extra name left over. So when we figured out the names, there were some communities that were in the light brown section that was called urban, and the dark brown was urban core, I think, or urban center. The people that were in the light brown didn't like being called urban. They felt better about being called urban edge. So all the names worked out then that way, and they kind of.
Just a cooler name, actually.
Edgier.
Well, it's consistent. Urban edge, suburban edge. It just flows better, and it seemed like it better described those communities. The ones that were previously called urban seem to feel better about being called urban edge.
Interesting. Yeah, great. Councilmember Chambliss?
Thank you, Chair. Just one other question, and that is the community designation that was removed. I'm not sure if I missed that. I'm assuming that the emerging suburban edge was folded into suburban edge?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Chambliss, as Councilmember Wolf mentioned, that basically is what happened, and then some that have the dark blue now expanded a little bit more.
Okay.
It's really interesting to see this over time. Yeah. Story of our metro
A
area.
little bit
Councilmember
of
Wolf?
obscure planning trivia. If you go back to the one from 1996, at that point, they were expanding the MUSA for each plat that came through in cities.
Yeah.
Every plat had to come through the Met Council and be added into the MUSA. And so the next one was when they started having the staging areas so that we didn't have to micromanage the MUSA expansions, which was lovely.
Mr. Chair,
Good to know.
if I can just add on to the trivia.
Yeah.
I came onto the council right after that was happening, and it was amazing to see the new sewer, big MUSA lines coming in, and then the cities were staging it as well. So it helped everybody to manage expectations.
To see where it was coming.
And then you had planned growth rather than all of the other things, and, yeah.
We learn something every day here at Met Council. Any other questions for Raya? Well, thank you so much.
Thank
We really
you.
appreciate your presentation, and we're going to hear from Michael Larson.
That's me. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and council members. It's good to see you again. My name is Mike Larson. I'm a planning analyst in the Community Development Division. I'm in the local planning assistance work unit, and I've been managing the values and vision process for the 2050 Regional Development Guide. I'm joined today by my colleague in Community Development, Dan Markell. He's my wingman today, so I appreciate him being here. He's also a planning analyst in the Community Development Division. Dan is one of 3 leads for our council's internal process for optimizing and integrating our regional planning efforts across our 3 divisions. In addition to Dan, who is our lead from Community Development, there are 2 other leads from the council, the other 2 divisions. Here with us today now is Lanya Ross. I think she's usually back there. Lanya is an environmental analyst in the Environmental Services Division. And unable to join us today is Bethany Brandt Sargent. She's a senior planner in Metropolitan Transportation Services. So just want to appreciate and acknowledge the 3 of them. So first of all, I do want to congratulate the new council members on their appointment to the council, and I really look forward to getting to know you and supporting your work on the council. So today we have 3 goals for our session with you. We want to review the 2050 Regional Development Guide process and timeline, recap the process to date, and the process that we've used to develop the working set of values and our vision statements, and begin a discussion of potential goals related to these vision statements. We hope this is part of a helpful orientation for the new council members, as well as a chance to get to a chance for you to get to know one another and share your perspectives on regional issues. So I'm going to turn over to Dan to talk a little about some process issues. We've got a fun diagram here to show what we do every 10 years.
Thanks, Mike. And again, my name is Dan Markell. I'm a planning analyst in community development, the research division. Most of my work is with these 2050 plans, so working across the different divisional lines. And it's really nice to see new council members. I learned the term, not old council members, but established, seasoned, weathered.
Weathered.
Especially this winter. But this day is kind of a really nice time to be able to have this discussion, because my job is to sort of give you, just a few slides, a kind of super overview of the planning process that we go through every 10 years. And so for newer council members, this is a chance to kind of level your knowledge with the seasoned council members. For the seasoned council members, it's just a chance to check in again. And then the discussion exercise we have built in, you'll be able to share more explicitly about the material that's been developed so far. So it's a kind of really wonderful time for this particular discussion. Okay, so every 10 years, we go through this process, the planning process. It starts off with, it's kicked off by the census, which starts in 2020. We get material back from the census sometime in 2021. And we start to develop what we call the Regional Development Guide. Sometimes you'll hear it the Metropolitan Development Guide, but the RDG, Regional Development Guide, is what we're kind of focused on here. And then there are additional documents that are specific regional policy plans and system plans. Put those all together, and it's the Regional Development Guide. Do you want to do it?
Oh, I don't know. Oh, yeah.
We didn't practice this part.
No, sorry.
So all that happens, this is the phase we're in right now. By 2024, the end of 2024, assuming all goes to plan, you folks will adopt the thing we develop over the next couple of years. And then we launch into applying that work through to work with communities to do their local comprehensive plans. We develop a bunch of supportive materials for the communities, and then they get to work. They have about 3 years to do their comprehensive plans, and then we review them. There's a whole process that you'll hear about. I don't want to overload you today. And then they implement them. And then guess what? It's 2030, and there's a new census, and this whole thing starts again. That's why it's in a circle. So it is a process. It's been under development for about 50 years, and we've fallen into this sequence that seems to work within the laws and the requirements and all the particulars.
And I think for this next round, we hope that they don't submit them all at once. So we're working on some ideas to get them to spread them out.
Yeah, back in the salt mines, there are people who have to review every piece of paper that comes in the door, and it's a big effort, and that's sort of largely been gone through at this point. So you won't have to hear the travails of that. You'll hear the echoes of it. So this is a multi-year initiative. We're going to focus right now on just getting to the end of 2025, which is really when we think about our products being largely done. It started significantly in 2021, doing some background research. Mike and friends have been working on developing the overall vision, the big ideas, the values, what state is the region in over the last few years, and that's what we'll be talking about in just a second. So we start with vision. There's also particular work being done in every different policy area. So in the committees that you sit on, you'll see work coming up about the transportation work that's going on, or the environmental service work, or housing, or parks. That's work that has been going on and will continue. it's moving, it's been in sort of the research phase, and it's going to be moving into the policy language development and discussion phase. So we work our way down from the top of this chart, and we're sort of in the middle of that green area in the middle, moving towards actual drafts, public hearings, things like that, where the colors get, I assume this is organized as red because it's more of an emergency or something as we get towards the end of the thing. But it all ends up in 2025, and there we are. So by the end of 2024, adoption of the Regional Development Guide. And super overview, you will see this diagram probably again and again as we go forward because it's something we settled on pretty early at the staff level to help us organize ourselves with each other. Existing, and it's sort of like what's in the development guide. The existing conditions and emerging changes, all that background research is ongoing work. In ES, there's a series of white papers that you can read. If you like ES, you can read 70 pages about surface water quality. Transportation is doing studies with consultants. Everyone's doing that background work. The Values and Vision project is Mike's, what would you call it?
Baby? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's well developed, and that's what we'll be talking about more today, especially about the goals part of it, which is where we're headed, to develop shared goals for the region, what's important for the region to work on. And once that stuff is established and in place, it affects all of those little arrows down at the bottom of this chart, the specific policies that happen in each of the policy areas. So land use policies, housing policies, et cetera. And you can't read the words, of course, at the bottom, but at the very bottom is the actions that we actually do. So what are the things that we're committing to actually doing with communities? You'll see that as the overall, and there's some definitions of what values and visions and goals are. Particularly, we're focused at this point on the cross-cutting goals. What are the things that we would say as a goal? And I'm going to use an example. In the environmental services work, they've done some strategic planning to talk about how wastewater and surface water quality and water supply work together so that they're one water. And they have developed a strategic phrase that's clean water for future generations. And so they are together working on clean water for future generations. That's a strategic plan for themselves. But when we think about that goal in the context of the regional plan, land use has something to do with clean water for future generations too. It has a lot to do with it, in fact. Transportation has a lot to do with clean water for future generations. So if something requires work in all the different policy areas or multiple policy areas, that would be a cross-cutting goal. And that's what we're looking for today, largely. Without taking any more time, I think I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So this slide is really meant to emphasize that our articulation of regional values and vision that we've done is really meant to set a stage, not establish something that's set in stone. But we do think that the language that has been developed today is fairly durable and has received, I think, positive feedback and is well supported. So we don't anticipate major changes to the language that we'll review again. And as we articulate high-level goals or cross-cutting goals for the region that cut across policy areas, we would expect to learn from the further stakeholder engagement and technical analysis that is planned. So that also will inform their sort of articulation of how we need to work together and what ways we could be effective working together. This particular slide shows our process to date that began in the second quarter of last year. It's involved consultation with numerous groups that advise the council, groups that include policymakers, technical experts, and residents. The processes for developing the various policy plans have also been underway. And these sessions have and will continue to inform and respond to the values and vision statements that the council endorsed on February 1st. Just for example, today the council hosted an all-day workshop for water utilities throughout the region. And part of that, we emphasized how water resources and water supply issues have informed the overall regional vision, and we'll get to learn more from engagement with groups like that on how we can integrate issues of water supply planning for the region's future. So in another example, our transportation division has been hosting listening sessions for regional transportation stakeholders, and you'll hear more about that input and the themes that we're hearing from staff next month. So again, further engagement is being planned and executed in other policy areas as well. So stay tuned for lots of information on all of that, and I hope for the new council members, I hope you like process because there's quite a bit of it.
Councilor Johnson, go ahead.
Just real quick question. And are cities stakeholders in this? It'd be nice if they were, metro
More
cities.
explicitly.
Because, they're the real, everybody's a partner. Everybody in the region is a partner. But this is the one where the rubber hits the road, or whatever analogy you want to use. So I think it's important that if a city looks at this, they don't go, well, where are we in this?
Right.
Because that's what I thought.
Right. Mr. Chair and Councilmember Johnson, if I may respond, we are working with metro cities. We have established a regional planning advisory group to consult with us in the regional development guide. I don't think that's represented. I think that maybe was,
It's RPEG at the bottom.
Right. And I think one of the things that I've suggested as a potential briefing for the council is to talk about all of the engagement that is planned and has been done, to give a kind of a comprehensive overview of how we're engaging, how we're identifying and engaging our stakeholders, including cities.
That'd be good.
And Mr. Chair, I'll just say, if we've got park partners, and, you cannot underemphasize it or overemphasize it enough, I guess I should say. Because I've been a city, there's some of us who've been a city and we're like, where are we in this?
Right.
And they are in it probably, but it should just jump out at them. It's just my humble opinion.
And I think all of our stakeholders want to see themselves there, but especially cities, because they play such an important role.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope that will also include townships in that definition of cities.
Yeah.
I have one township that's larger than the vast, vast, vast majority of cities in the state of Minnesota. And they need to be a part of this conversation.
And they swing above their weight.
They do. Really do.
Well, Mr. Chair, council members, Councilmember Vento, certainly we've done our own stakeholder analysis, and I know various divisions have undertaken stakeholder analysis and are developing engagement plans and have undertaken engagement activities, and I think it would probably be prudent to share a comprehensive overview of that at some point in the near future. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Councilmember Carter.
Need not ignore that counties also want to be involved.
Yes.
With the alignment that is done, of course.
Yes. Mr. Chair, Councilmember Carter, counties do play an important role, not the least of which is transportation. Some of them are regional park implementing agencies. Some of them are involved in water resources management. So, point well taken.
Parks.
All right, I will continue. So during discussions from various groups and engagement with you related to regional values or what people value for our region, a set of related words and themes kept coming up in conversations. We had, as a result of that process, we had identified what appeared to be kind of the most powerful expressions of those, and I had identified those as core values. However, all of the words that you see do show up in the language that we're using, and we consider these particular words as part of our lexicon or vocabulary as we think about values and expressing them in our policy and programming work. So what we wanted to be very mindful as we created and drafted our language around values. We developed a form that included a short form statement for our values. For our core value of equity, we state that we value the people and communities of a region. The value statements also have an acknowledged statement. In this case, is that our region is economically and culturally vibrant. We also recognize, however, that the harm and disparities and injustices, including racism, have created. In our engagement with the previous council, we wanted to acknowledge both the positive and the negative and create a balance in the tone as we used in these particular statements. And third, we wanted to develop a commitment statement. So we put our values into actions. In this case, we are dedicated to creating systems, policies, and programs that repair and heal past harm, foster an equitable future, and eliminate disparities. The communities that have been marginalized in the past will be at the center of the work and leadership role. The council's work on equity is not new, and it's been ongoing, and the language is inspired by a broader equity framework that we are developing. This work is on the agenda for the next meeting of the Equity Advisory Committee, which meets next Tuesday. So I encourage you, if you're interested in that equity framework work and discussion and dialogue, to tune into that, participate in that. Yes, much going on on the equity front and analysis. Our next core value, second of our four is on leadership. We value those in our region who inspire and motivate others for positive change. Our region is known for civic engagement, and we need this kind of broad leadership to help confront the significant challenges we face, around equity, climate change, safety, which obviously has been a big topic of discussion, not just today, but in other events, venues as well, and other pressing issues that the region face. And to maximize the potential for our region and our communities, we turn to leadership that is diverse, collaborative, culturally competent, and innovative. We encourage this kind of leadership across all sectors, including business, government, nonprofit, and education. And I hope you're seeing some of the other words that we had identified and kept coming up, again, as part of our lexicon. The third core values is related to accountability. The short form, we value being effective in our work and achieving measurable outcomes. Our region is known for its research, initiatives, and collaborations. We must be open to criticism and clearly understand when we are not achieving results or have harmed communities. And finally, we recognize that we can maximize our effectiveness by being in partnership with others. We will be transparent and flexible so that we can change course if we need to, or when needed. And finally, stewardship is the fourth regional core value. Succinctly, we value our region's resources. Our resources include our natural, economic, and financial resources, as well as our infrastructure. We recognize that these resources may be vulnerable over time to changing conditions, including from climate change. And we must design our systems and allocate our resources in a way that can be sustained over time and support the needs of future generations. And I'll just pause there if there's any comments or from existing seasoned established council members or questions from new council members.
Any questions at this point?
Mr. Chair, yeah, thanks. And thanks, Mr. Larson, for both of you for the presentation. You also said comments, Mike, right? And so I don't know, did you want, or is it just questions that
Comments
we're
are
doing?
always welcome.
Okay, I just want to be sure. All right, thanks.
Always open.
Yeah, no, thanks. I really appreciate this. And are we doing workshopping later or some kind of?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so I can hold some of these till then, but under the core values, there were just two things that kind of jumped out at me, and one was under the leadership description in the second paragraph when you talk about the significant challenges we face, and it's hard when you start listing them, right? Because you're going to leave something out or something, and so I just don't know. To me, I just felt that there was something missing here. Like there's economic challenges, there's transportation challenges, things like that as well. And so maybe I'm trying to put too fine a point on it. But and then also under the core values, under the core values under resources, and again, it's kind of the listing what we include, but when you say natural, economic, financial, as well as our infrastructure, to me, it feels like with the word infrastructure, we're trying to get at the built environment and the built resources, right? And so just to kind of put that out there. Thanks.
Great comments.
Chair, Councilmember Lilligren, thank you for your comments. I will also emphasize that too, we will have an opportunity to elaborate on what we mean in the narrative of the plan.
Great.
Or in engagement tools that we might create for any particular discussion that we might have around these values, either internally or externally.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, I will continue. So throughout our process, we had identified what we call significant cross-cutting regional issues. These are issues that, as defined, cut across policy domains and may require special collaboration across our work areas and perhaps with other external partners as well. And furthermore, they may relate to each other in certain respects. And so we identified 4. And not surprisingly, our region's issues related to racial disparities, and other inequities were front and center in a lot of this discussion. The second is public health, safety, and well-being, which arguably has been under stress lately. We went through a public health emergency with COVID. We went through significant trauma related to the killing of George Floyd and the civil unrest that happened. And we are dealing with the reverberations of these significant events today. So I think the public health, safety, well-being of the region has been stressed. The third cross-cutting issue is climate. Aspects of this issue, relate to our ability to adapt to climate change, changing climate, and reduce or eliminate our impacts on greenhouse gases, and ensure that our infrastructure and natural systems, our built environments, and our natural systems are resilient over time to what we may face in terms of changing or increased stresses on those systems. And the fourth is relates to natural systems, important assets to our region that may be under stress or in some cases experienced inequitably, ensuring that we can provide safe and reliable water for future generations is what is at the heart of our work in environmental services, and our regional park system is a natural resource-based system that we value immensely, and so that may be under stress or in some cases shared inequitably as well. So our regional vision statements were developed out of that framework of understanding, but we wanted to build in them in a way that was more positive and optimistic about the challenges that we face and the opportunities that we might have in the future. So, and I think we forget about all, we've gone through, I think we're going through a lot of challenges and trauma now, but we have to remember also that our region has much to be proud of, and I think it's important to acknowledge that. So our first vision statement is our region is equitable, inclusive, and welcoming. Again, we acknowledge that our quality of life is high by national standards, but not all communities share in this. We envision a future where these inequities and injustice have been eliminated, and all residents and newcomers feel welcome, included, and empowered. The second statement that relates to the public health issue, the public health and safety issue, is that our communities are healthy, safe, and vibrant. The well-being of our region depends on the strength and inclusiveness of our economy. And again, that's an area where I think we can find pride in terms of the strength and resilience of our economy. But that, in addition to the quality, safety, and reliability of our public infrastructure and services. But obviously not all people share in this, and we envision a future where our region's residents can lead healthy, productive, and rewarding lives with a sense of security, agency, and well-being. The third regional vision statement is we lead on addressing climate change. Our region leads on the critical issue of climate change, and we envision a future where we have eliminated or mitigated greenhouse gas emissions and have adapted to ensure that our communities and systems are resilient. And the fourth is we protect and restore natural systems. Our region has world-class parks and abundant natural resources, and we envision a future where our natural systems are increasingly protected, integrated, and restored to ensure high quality of life for our growing region. I guess I'd pause there to see if there's any questions or reactions from new or established.
Thank you both. I'm going to have to leave early tonight because of another meeting. And I have a request. I don't know that it necessarily has to be addressed tonight. Maybe it can be next week. at our council workshop. But I would like us, at some point in this discussion, to spend time talking about going forward, how we're going to engage the public and how we're going to encourage our partners in the work that is under the purview of the Met Council to engage with the community. During the last 4 years, particularly as it relates to the Purple Line, I've been concerned about when and how we communicate, and it's not all on us, and it's not all on the cities or the counties, but I think part of it is people get their information from so many places. And particularly when readership of newspapers is down and use of social media is up, and some of it is accurate and some of it's so far off the wall you can't even describe it. But I think we've somehow got to have some sort of a real heart-to-heart with all of our partners about how going forward, how are we going to communicate, whether it's dealing with community development, transit, environmental services, regardless of what it is. Metropolitan Parks and Open Space, we've got some hot issues coming up in the not-too-distant future, and I apologize. Our workshop isn't next week, it's in 2 weeks. I was
That's all right. We know.
getting a little lost in the dates. But it doesn't matter what issue we're talking about. There's just a whole lot of confusion and frankly frustration out there. And there are folks who don't feel as though they're being heard. And I think their concern many times is legitimate. And it's one goal I have for my next 4 years is to figure out how we can redefine and better engage with the public. And I think it starts with our plan, our regional plan.
Right, thank you. Councilmember Pacheco and then Councilmember Chandler.
Sure, Mr. Chair. It's something simple, actually. It's, when I look at it, the 2 points of information here, we have Regional Development Guide, Community Designations, and they have a presentation, and I would go the other way. I would think you would have your goals and values first, and then these two have to be working together somehow, because it goes it's more of an internal question of how we communicate. And we communicate through silos of these different programs, whether it's in transportation, and I know what's in front of me, but the other people who aren't in the transportation committee are having to respond or are having to answer some questions out in the community that they weren't at the meeting, and vice versa. And I go to the development, I have to, call my friend here because I'm lost. And so I think there's ways to do that, but we should have one vision, mission, or values for the Met Council. And these things should feed into this is where we're going, 2050. If we just under the banner of community development guide and community development guide, and they don't have the same values, and you talk about getting these councils, the last presentation, we had a whole list of cities that were engaged. And so either we start putting them back together or to where it has a solid thing that we can all, it's like the 40 safety plan. Has 40 things that we're going to work on. Well, unless we start making these a little more condensed where folks can really get around it, we're going to have 45, because the last 5 are going to try to interpret for the other people. So it just kind of struck me when I was looking at it, is that we really need to take a look at how we start integrating our language and our processes.
Great. Councilmember, do you want to respond to that first?
I think Mike wants me to respond. Chair and council member, thank you for that comment, and well said. A couple of the layers that I didn't present about the overall process is that we entered into this round of regional planning in a different way. We have 3 co-sponsors, which are the executive directors of community development, transportation, and environmental services. So they lead all the staff work that's going on, and beneath that group, so there's a kind of crossing right there. Beneath that group, there's what we call the integration team of kind of managers throughout the council who work out the mechanics and the sort of finer points about whose interests are being represented. I need safety to be more on here. I need water. And all that work is embedded in what we talked about, and we would welcome the chance to bring that forward and talk about it in more detail, and how it is or maybe is not getting communicated.
Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you, Chair. So in my work with continuous improvement, the metrics are so important. And I also like to get a perspective of where we've come from. So before I can actually understand the impact of 2050 Regional Development Guide, I'd like to see what were some of the key points in the 2040 Regional Development Guide, what has changed, what were some of the outcomes, and what was the framework for that Regional Development Guide, and how has it changed our vision? So those are some of the things that I think would help myself and even our newest council members to kind of do a comparison. Because if we don't look at where we were, I mean, we talked about the historical inequities and we talked about some of the historical things, then it's really hard to know how much of a punch is our 2050 regional vision going to have in our plan as compared to what we did in 2030 and 2040. I often see, people kind of just start from scratch without looking back. And I think sometimes we miss an opportunity for real impact when we do that. So I need to see that before I can rubber stamp 2050.
And the outcomes compared to those plans.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with what everybody has said, so this is one of those moments where I feel like we're in our zone, right? As council members doing our thing. And so we've got our regional vision, but I know we also have a Met Council vision. And I don't know when that was last updated, but the two really need to sync together because we're a large institution that's going to be working to enact all of this with partners. So I'm hoping that, not to start, too many other projects for staff or us, but it all has to sync up, or it won't make sense. And we've all been through training on visions and strategic plans and all that, but I think that it has to be front and center every day for everybody working at the council, including all of us, posted somewhere, showing up somewhere, so that we remember what every day we're really working towards internally in our own work here at the council, so that we can impact the regional vision out there. I appreciate knowing where we've been so that we know where we're going. And I still think, first of all, let me just say this. I think the council does exceptional work, and I think we still work in silos. And I know that there's cross-collaboration, but it's hard to change because we've got really very different lines of business that intersect at certain levels, and they're massive in some cases. So I just think we have to break down the silos, and that has to take place internally. People have to drive that internally. It's been said for years and years and years, so I'm just going to put that out there on the table as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson, and be mindful that you're right. Sometimes what's external versus what's the work of the council. And this workshop in 2 weeks, 29th, we're going to kind of look at that strategic planning kind of update, aligning with the governor's One Minnesota plan. So that might help give us a little better points of reference. Councilmember Carter.
I just really want to commend the work thus far. And thank you for the approach of looking at those cross-cutting areas and identifying the big work, because when we get up and we look off the balcony to see what impact we really want to have, those cross-cutting statements, I believe, do reflect that kind of impact. And I noticed that in your timeline, it starts actually in 2021. I went to cough, so I might have missed a little bit there. But in 2021, you identify that there was quite a bit of extensive or intensive outreach and engagement that was done. So as we go back and we talk about this work and we reflect even in our internal session on the 29th, I'd love to know more about that engagement and how it has led us to the identification of those cross-cutting themes, which to my mind then really do drive the alignment work and process that we're going to do. I'd like to know more about that 2021 work because we know that 2020-21 were pandemic as well. And if there are gaps in the outreach that we need to be sure are cured, I know the council will be interested in moving forward while assuring that those gaps are filled and that we have the kind of engagement and communication that we need. Our alignment and structure and work to those agreed upon focuses that are cross-cutting, I think is going to be critical as we look toward the next period in time. And I hope that will drive all of us to think about the kind of structure, the kind of budgets, the kind of collaboration that is needed internally as well as externally. So thank you again. Compliments to the work thus far. Looking forward to understanding more about that engagement and how we use these cross-cutting themes moving forward.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, Michael, what's, Councilmember Wilson. Up in the excerpt.
I always get lost up here in the end. I need to start having some
That's
movement
good.
too.
Whatever it takes.
I just wanted to follow up on some comments that Councilmember Chambliss made. One of the real challenges of being a long-term planning organization is that you don't get your results right away, because the 2040 plan didn't really go into effect until pretty much 2020. So we're, 3 years in on the results of that. All of the development that happened up before that time while we were going through all of the process of the 2040 plan was under the 2030 plan. So we won't have the real results of the 2040 plan until the end of this decade, when we've already approved the next iteration. So it makes it really hard to measure your outcomes when they're so far along in the process.
Yeah,
On that
go ahead.
point.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Clearly, that is challenging. It also makes it important that when the plans are in the process of moving, we are able to look back, i.e. to the 2030 plan, and identify its motivations for the 2040, and then how we're moving forward toward 2050. So still going back and doing that assessment is very, very important. And thank you for pointing out that we don't just have one plan at a time. We certainly have to look back farther and look forward so much farther as well.
I did have a question.
Councilmember Carter.
Maybe I missed something. I was just interested in to what extent do we look at, because each individual city and town, they have their own plans, long-range plans, and how do we incorporate that in the process of sometimes there may be some obvious things that maybe we overlook that maybe some city, large or small, has already incorporated that we can incorporate in our process. Also, it helps for them to understand that we're listening to them and we're learning from them as well as they're learning from us in building this plan.
Well, I think we undoubtedly, great question. We undoubtedly learn a lot as we approve the individual township, city comprehensive plans, which we're just completing as we embark on this new cycle. So it's one continuous process. So, and then they set their comprehensive plans based on our regional guide, so.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, we authorize the plans.
We authorize it. We don't approve, we authorize.
Yeah, cities like the word authorize.
Good safety tip.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Lisa Barras, you came with the look of have something to say.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm Lisa Barajas, Executive Director of the Community Development Division. And this is a hard place for, I think, new council members to step into, since we've been doing this work and discussion internally for a long time and have been providing reports and pieces over the last 3 years, I think. Comp Plan Composite has been a lot of that. I know that Community Development Committee has been hearing about what did we learn from comprehensive plans, what were the themes, and changes that we saw, density analysis. I know that Mike had presented with Caitlin at Community Development as well, are really part of that, what was different from 2030 to 2040, and really building on what are we hearing local governments identifying as their vision and values in their now adopted plans. That was a key component of how we got to what you see in front of us today, by really just learning from what communities have already done as part of their plans. So I know it's a lot to take in because it's like 3 years worth of work that we do in these, with our big reports individually, but build up over time to build this foundation of understanding and knowledge, and also not give you an 8-hour dissertation in one fell swoop at the same time, but trying to bring that in pieces that we can dwell upon, investigate, pull apart, and think about. Some of the work that we've done in the past with bringing city voices to the table, we last year had a panel of local units of government and how they addressed equity issues in their plans. And this year we will continue to bring panels to you of city and local government representatives on the cross-cutting issues so that you can hear from them about how the context across the region is different and how they continue to grapple with these cross-cutting issues themselves within their communities. That's just one of the aspects of how we build on that, but I wanted to provide that broader context. I know we have a lot of upcoming onboarding discussions in our upcoming workshop in a couple of weeks, as well as that community development, to remind us of where we've been and then where we want to go from here. But it's a lot, and there are a lot of reports that we know, as Angela and I were just looking at slides this morning, and the list of the volume of information that we brought. We're like, how do we sum this up? Because you can't really sum it up because it is just part of the rhythm of the work that we do here with our annual reports on what's happening in the region, what are we learning, what are communities doing, trends in comp plan amendments, development trends, housing trends, kind of those annual pictures are meant to give you that snapshot over time. But certainly that longer look back, that bigger picture, we can find additional ways to remind us of where we've been, but also to onboard members who haven't been here for the last several years of the work that we have accomplished so far, because it's a significant volume of work, not just in community development, but across all of our divisions that are regular reporting through their committees as well, that inform all of this work. So I just wanted to provide that background. I know it's really important because it is a key component of how we do long-range planning, to look back at where we've been, where are we today, and where do we want to go from here. And so that is going to continue to evolve as we do this engagement, but also as we continue to discuss with all of you what we're learning and what is of interest to you. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, for that context. I appreciate that. Now, I notice it's 20 minutes to 6. Are you planning a little subgroups? Can you kind of give us a framework where we're going to best spend that 20 minutes?
Mr. Chair, not anymore.
Okay, well, that was an option.
What I'm going to suggest is to kind of run through the last slides and talk about what we had tended to do and just remain as a large group. I want to say I appreciate Director Braha's comments. I think and other staff here are listening intently. A lot, everything of what the comments and questions and challenges resonates with us, and take that input very seriously. So I really don't have time to kind of get in or necessarily prepare to respond to all of those questions, but we certainly listen and respect what we're hearing. I am a sector rep. I work with 13 specific communities in the region. I have an established relationship with those communities. We've reviewed comprehensive plans from their last round, and so we are to a large degree sensitized to kind of what the issues and challenges and opportunities are in our constituent cities. Consider them to be important relationships as other stakeholders in the region as well. And as Director Barajas overviewed all of the input and information and analysis and engagement, sometimes it is like drinking from a fire hose, and it's a lot to process. And certainly, how we communicate and synthesize that information is something that's always front and center for us, but often very nuanced and complex depending on the process that we're involved in or the stakeholders that we're working with. So what I will do is.
Councilmember Johnson, did you have a
I just want to
question?
briefly say thank you for trying to synthesize things for us, because it is like drinking from a fire hose. But I would also challenge staff, as some of us mature into the roles and the new council members have their niches, give us as much as we can take, because there are complex issues that we are voting on that have millions or billions of dollars attached to them, and deep roots into what this is we're trying to do. And the better we, as 17 members who represent our districts, can explain things at a deeper level, the better off we'll be. So I know you've got all of us coming in at various levels, but I know things have to be synthesized, especially where we've got time limits, but I would just challenge the team to give us as much as we're willing to take and absorb and really understand, because we become better policymakers when we really know what's going on, and not just the executive 2-paragraph thing that we're trying to figure out what it means. So I appreciate what you're doing, and we want to be more like you so that we can, But I think it's
Always
valuable.
cycle.
Don't assume that it's too much for us. We can do it.
All right, moving right along. I think I'm gonna kind of buzz through this slide a little bit. These are the vision statements, really tended to illustrate how they're intended to inform the entire regional development guide. And then we have our constituent policy areas, and with various parties and partners that are responsible for helping implement the long-term regional vision. So what we had wanted to do today is pivot towards a discussion of what might be, as we've discussed, what might be the goals for the region, including you, but not limited to you in this discussion. A discussion of goals, reflection on goals has been part of ongoing policy planning efforts. And before I forget, I do want to respond to one thing that came up. I think what we're hearing about in terms of our policy development process is that we're hearing that less may be more in terms of sometimes we try to address all of the issues in the region, and we've heard that sometimes we have perhaps more goals or objectives than we can meaningfully measure. And so we really want to identify where the most meaningful measures or goals are for our region, and implement a value related to accountability, and be able to demonstrate whether we're making progress, either us as a council or as a region through our relationship with those other stakeholders. So as we develop goals, we want to reflect our region's core values, implement the regional vision statements, broadly describe the desired outcomes we want to see for the region. What does that vision statement mean in terms of what would that look and feel like for communities and our region as a whole? We wanted to relate across our policy areas. So if we're talking about, for example, land use and transportation, we might be talking about how to create a regional development environment that's more conducive to transit, walking, bicycling, that kind of thing. So there are a number of areas, cross-cutting policy areas, and we want to explore, what might be shared goals, say related to accessibility. That might have a transit dimension, it might have an ADA dimension, it might be a local planning area where they're trying to create housing opportunities and walkable communities, for example. And again, we also want to align with state planning goals or recent work that has been done by state agencies that we might wish to align with. So we had tended to break you into groups to have you choose one of the vision statements to focus a discussion on. We have 14 minutes, so I've just got one more slide, and then we'll consider how we want to work with a few minutes we have remaining. So I just wanted to tease out some of the other things that are coming up for you in terms of information, onboarding, orientation, more regional development guide related work. As we had discussed, you'll get a kind of a planning overview in a couple weeks on the special council meeting on the 29th. At the committee of the whole next month on the 5th, you're going to hear about our process of developing regional population, household, and employment forecasts for the 2050 guide, which is a fundamental input for our planning process. And you'll hear also about the process for developing the update to the transportation policy plan. Next month, I will return, and we'll continue a discussion of goals. And on the 19th, and here's an example where we're continuing to provide opportunities to showcase cities or to include cities in discussion with you. We're going to aligned with Earth Day, which will be that week, is to hear stories from cities about how they're addressing climate-related issues. And we have Woodbury and Fridley lined up as for participation to hear from them directly. And I think a third city has been invited and is in the works. And in terms of engagement in our efforts to do kind of creative, integrated engagement, I think we had shared with you the work we've done in our young leaders collaboration, policy collaboration. We're working with a number of youth-serving organizations and have selected youth to explore policy issues and how they impact their lives. These are youth in the region that will be arguably middle-aged by 2050. And so on the 17th at the Committee of the Whole, they are going to do a poster session out in the lobby, and then they will present on their perspectives on regional policy and then their particular vision for the region. So I'm very excited about hearing about that. So what I would, we can, let's see, we've got 12 minutes. So that's me, if you want me, my contact information on the screen. So what we had hoped to do, and I'd certainly like your feedback if we'd like to do this at the next Committee of the Whole meeting, was again to break out by vision statements, choose a vision statement, to reflect on that vision statement and what it might mean in terms of what would the region look like, what would be the high-level outcomes that would achieve our vision, how those vision statements cut across our policy areas, to get your input and ideas.
Yeah, I suggest, Michael, and I appreciate this so much, that we should take this back and find a best way to schedule and maybe even have a facilitator kind of get the best out of us. Because I think we need to be mindful of how to organize our time to be really productive when we come together. So I appreciate that. I think right now we don't want to shortchange it.
Right.
Or this work, but I also think we can manage our meetings appropriately. We are committing to this 4 to 6 because people have lives and families and work, and so, you know, I just want to be mindful of that. I think when we look for these Committee of the Whole, we have some other issues, so we're going to take this back and our kind of maybe talk about the committee chairs to best use this time, and we might try to find a way to facilitate that, so we're really getting engaged. But I love the idea of breakouts, but we should be thoughtful about getting that appropriately planned. But but having said that, we have a few minutes. Councilmember Lindner.
Oh, thanks. I wasn't looking for the floor, but I'll take it. So
I have to speak now.
Yeah, no, I did have something I wanted to say, but I was actually going to wait politely, but I guess I'll be a little more assertive. So I like the conversation, and Mr. Chair, your plan to kind of return to this. I do think we need to get down into a little bit crunchier, munchier conversation. I would have concerns if we did this work tonight because the West Metro was so overly represented. I'd feel like we had too much influence on the conversation today. So I'm looking forward to more of a workshop. And this room doesn't really lend itself that well to.
We didn't expect to be here. So.
Yeah, to breakout sessions.
And I forgot to mention, they're repairing the AV in the other room. This is why we're brought here, so it's a good reason.
So look forward to that. And then my one comment has to do with the cross-cutting goals. And I really liked when you were presenting the regional values, visions, and goals, and you discussed the cross-cutting goals. And I love that you used water and water for future generations. That language just really resonates with me. So thank you for using that language. But I think that was a good example of how, you know, land use policies, housing policies, parks policies, transportation policies all touch, you know, the idea of water. And so it was a good idea for a good example for the cross-cutting goals. And I made this comment at Community Development Committee as well. I've had conversation with Mr. Larson. I've had maybe a couple conversations with Director Barajas. But it goes to the idea of land acknowledgements, which are very, very popular right now, and just yesterday, I'm an officer of the City of Minneapolis Convention and Visitors Bureau. It's called Meet Minneapolis. We had our annual meeting yesterday. We presented our land acknowledgement to the world, which is really, moves towards action. And then I was given the opportunity to speak to this group of maybe 550 kind of in downtown influencer types about the importance of putting that into action. And so really, and you'll hear this a lot in the Native community, people are looking for more action than acknowledgement. Acknowledgement is an important step. And so as we're looking at 2050 design guidelines and planning, I mean, that's way off in the future, and I feel like it would benefit us and benefit the region to start sort of incorporating some of this, both acknowledgement and sort of actions into our 2050 planning. And now I don't know what that looks like yet, but I know that Mr. Larson has given it some thought, and I just want to kind of put my colleagues on notice that that's something that I'm going to keep elevating as we develop the guidelines and what that might look like as a regional planning agency, how we incorporate that into our 2050 guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Pacheco.
Yep, I said a little one. Okay, Mr. Chair, I'm president of the Latino Chamber of Commerce. I deal with a lot of small businesses and large businesses, and I don't see the business reflected in the debate or the discussions we've been having to date. And that's real crucial right now, because they're more, especially the immigrant population, more likely to start a business than go up a corporate ladder. And we're just kind of leaving them out. But then the corporations are asking what their role is here too, especially like downtown. So I think that as we start planning for we kind of keep that in mind.
And I reflect on some of the McKinsey work on the future of work. It's going to be different. It is different. Yeah. Any other thoughts here as we wrap up? All right, this is a great continuing of the conversation. And when you lay out the schedule, it shows we're really getting into the meat of it. So welcome, new council members. We're going to stop calling you new really soon. And I appreciate your presentations, and we're going to welcome you back soon. So big day. You don't have to fear the Ides of March, you know. And thank you all for coming and for your thoughts and your engagement. And this meeting is adjourned. We'll see you in a week, if not sooner.